Good morning, everybody, and good morning to the people that are somewhere in the void over there. Delighted to be here. Got really interesting set of panelists. Obviously, Rod and Elizabeth just painted a vision of what digital identity could be like in the future. But the reality is we're actually a little bit of a way from that at the moment. So we're going to be exploring that. What the current state of affairs is, what an ecosystem would look like, and then see where we might go. But first, let's introduce the panelists. So, start with you, Martin. Perhaps you can introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself and why you're interested in talking about identity ecosystems.
So, thank you, Steve. My name is Martin Sladecek, coming from Czech Republic, but actually working in France for Société Générale. I was acting many years as a consultant and advisor, and then I joined KB, the Czech Société group subsidiary. And what you have just seen in that video as a theoretical idea, we created in the reality. So today in the Czech Republic, there is a national bank identity hub where are connected the major Czech banks, as well as there is connected the whole Czech e-government. And as well as, on top of that, there are connected commercial partners or third parties. Today, few tens of them. Until the end, there is expected 100. And this is just in few months since its commercial start. So I can just prove what you have seen. It's working, and it's worth of create. So that's me. Hello.
Great. Thank you, Martin. Annette.
Thank you. Annet Steenbergen is my name. I have a background in international border management, and in 2011 ended up in the beautiful I should say because it's a country, in Aruba, which is a beautiful island in the Caribbean, and was able to...
I have to say, I had to look it up on a map, but I do know where it is now. So.
I do. Yeah. It's a country within the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and I was able to co-initiate a innovative passenger facilitation process at the airport together with the airline and the airport and the government, and that by accident became the first contactless seamless passenger facilitation in the world using a single biometric token. And from there things developed, and I've become very involved in IATA, asked on behalf of Aruba to chair the facilitation working group. IATA has been involved in setting standards for traveling with a digital identity, crossing borders. So ecosystems in an international ecosystem for digital identity that allows you to cross a border, but also board a flight and get services at an airport are what interest me. But I'm also involved in the e-government now for the government of Aruba. So that presentation is also very interesting.
Great. Mark.
Hi, Steve. So I'm Mark Haine. As you can see from the presentation, I'm a co-chair of one of the OpenID Foundation working groups, specifically the eKYC and Identity Assurance working group. I also run my own boutique consultancy with a couple of team members, focusing on digital identity and security concerns, primarily focusing on financial services, but in some fintechy sort of space as well. And alongside Elizabeth and Rod, who you saw the video from earlier, I was a co-author and co-editor of the GAIN white paper.
Great, thank you. And just for completeness, I'm Steve Pannifer, Managing Director of Hyperion. We specialise in payments and identity. I thought it would be useful for us to just take a step back for a second, and hope you forgive me for doing this, but ask the question, what actually is digital identity? I think it's often useful to do this because people come from different kind of angles and different perspectives. So I don't know who wants to go first. Mark, I'll go with you, since you've been doing work with the OpenID Foundation. I mean, surely you must be able to define what digital identity is.
So for me, digital identity is a manifestation of your real identity, which is just a load of bits of information about you as a person. it often originates from the government of the country that you choose to reside in. I know that can get complex too, because some people have multiple nationalities. But really, it's about uniquely identifying somebody in the digital realm.
Okay.
So attributes like first name, last name, date of birth, maybe slightly more edge cases, or maybe not edge cases, but slightly away from the core identity, maybe a passport number or a social security number are often used in digital identity context as well.
Would the other speakers agree with that?
Yep.
I will just add one thing. You mentioned the set of attributes, but in the fact, I can say that it's a virtualization of the governmental either identity document or the passport. So if I may say, it's a virtualization of the proof that I am I.
It's interesting because there's this phrase that gets thrown around a lot about it being who you say you are. Right, it's used a lot. It's used. The government here uses it in the framework.
As well as finances and banking.
Yeah, but actually, often we're talking about things, not just who you say you are, but things about you. So, for example, the age verification one there is, am I entitled to buy this glass of wine or whatever? You can think of qualifications, all sorts of other things I might want to kind of attach to my identity.
So you might attach them to your identity. I'm not sure those are core identity attributes.
But they're all part of the problem that we're trying to solve here, which is how do I get control of my data and be able to make my data available so that I can use it in transactions and to do things digitally.
Yeah. Right? I think just to the point about it all originating from government identity, I think that's not always the case either. You might wish to have a pseudonymous identity or anonymous identity. It's still possible to create those. Maybe over time you won't be able to use them as much as you have done historically. Everybody knows how to create another Google account, and that forms a digital identity. It provides claims about the person who is presenting it.
So I am going to move on into ecosystems in a bit, but this kind of bothers me, so I want to just kind of pursue it a bit further. Identity is not just about individuals, is it? We often talk about individuals, but organisations have identities. From a banking point of view, you have to do know your customer on banking customers. Right?
Honestly, Advance, I have to agree and disagree. Because in the end, what are companies? There are physical people, persons, which are entitled to do something, to act on behalf of the company. So typically, in countries, you have national registry of companies, as well as with enlisted people who are entitled to act on behalf of the company with different set of roles or entitlement. But in the end, there is needed the proof that I am I, and second proof that I'm entitled to act on behalf of something, because it can be not only in case of companies. You could be entitled to act on behalf of your retired parents, of your children, and so on. Anything you can imagine. And especially in the world of banking and finances, the identity is the key for any interaction. So that was why it was so strongly said that when banks do that KYC procedure, then you can virtualize or digitalize the future with the identity later.
Okay, so that's quite helpful. So that there is some identity stuff that happens to happen. You want to say something?
No, it always links back to an individual.
Yes.
I agree with you, yes.
Yeah, so there's identity stuff about organisations, but actually it's individuals.
Yes.
Let me just pick up one other thing from
Steve, sorry to butt in.
No, please do.
On the corporate identity kind of part of the space, I have actually been working with some of the other OpenID Foundation members on how to look at the legal entity problem space in the context of OpenID Connect. OpenID Connect itself actually talks very explicitly in its core specification about OpenID Connect presenting information about the end user. So it's always a human that's acting.
Interesting, okay.
And what we're doing is we're looking at extending spec to express exactly what Martin was talking about in a standardized fashion, which is that on behalf of use case. So we're talking about building a schema to express that somebody may act on behalf of a legal entity or on behalf of another natural person.
Okay, good. So let's assume that we're focusing on individuals. We don't have time to have a massive debate on this topic, unfortunately. I'd love to take the whole day, but we've only been given half an hour, 40 minutes, something like that. So on the video, there was the suggestion that we should have one identity. And I found that quite a kind of interesting kind of suggestion. So what do you feel about that? Is that the goal, the vision here, that we all have one identity?
Would be easy. As long as
Easy and dangerous.
not if I can use it in a self-sovereign manner, and I can choose every time I use my identity to choose whatever credential of that identity or attribute I am using.
Because this goes to it depends what you're talking about, right? If you're talking about I've got a thing, a tool that I can use to share information about myself, then that's fine. And if I'm sharing different data with different parties, and I've got control over that, and there's no way of them corroborating or talking to each other in the background, that might be fine. But that's the idea of one identity kind of suggests that it's one thing, and kind of people can start to join the dots together without my permission, right?
That's scary.
We don't want that, right?
No, absolutely.
On the other hand, if there is the control for the user, consents, some like borders and blindness in between parties, it could be possible. So I know that you are deep in, for example, for the Canada scheme,
yes.
I think that's quite nice illustration how things could work easily. And as well as in the Czech, what we have built, there is a hub, which is just a railway for the interconnection or interaction of the bank, third-party provider, and the end user. But the hub isn't acting anyhow else than just connecting these parties together. So it's quite simple, quite easy, and still secure. Yeah. And as well as there is kept an eye on the privacy of data. So
I think when we talk about one identity, what we actually mean is that each organisation that I'm talking to, communicating with, they have a version of my identity, and it's unique to that relationship and those transactions. But they can't talk to another organisation and link the two together. Me in the middle, for me it's one thing, right? But for everyone else, it's unique to the relationship. I think that's kind of what we're talking about here.
And the key point is that you stay in the control.
Yeah. So we're a long way from this being a reality. So how bad is it just now?
It's quite bad.
Explain.
From a personal perspective, I was looking in my my little vault of useful things, like how to log in to many places. I'm like 350 different identities in practice. I know I'm a bit maybe a deeper user of all of the different services online than perhaps average, but it's not a pleasant user experience. And at the end of the day, it's costing me time and putting me off from adopting new things, which is bad for everybody.
So I mean, just thinking about this, so we've got government representative, financial services. From a government point of view, I mean, we're talking about putting people in control of their data. How does that impact citizens, and how does that impact governments?
Well, when you're born, your parents go to the government,
yes,
at least in Europe, and then they say, this is my new child. And from that moment on, your identity exists. So governments provide you identity documents, they provide you a travel document to travel. So the next step is that they have to provide you a digital identity as well, because we live in a digital age. So we need a representation of our identity card or our passport to use for services, to travel. So I think governments need to do something. The banks in Scandinavia basically did a wonderful job, but they stepped in where governments could have done that as well. Could have been. So I think it is, you see, for instance, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, when you travel to the United States or when you leave, they check your identity, but they can also share that and give it identity as a service to the airline. They can check it for the airline. So governments can do this, which is useful because it's useful for the government and it's useful for, in this case, the airline. So it could be...
Yeah, there seem at the moment to be these sort of two different worlds. You've got the border control, civil identity world, and we have a system, a mature system built around passports and travel documents.
Yep.
And then there's this sort of digital economy kind of part of government. So if you think about things like the EIDAS regulation in Europe, or the framework that DCMS is working on here in the UK, it's very much about how do we, or in fact there's also an initiative in government as well about building a one log-on for government here in the UK, but it's very much about how you have to get access to digital services. But those two things often seem to be quite kind of separated, different.
Yeah.
Should they be?
Well, again, going back to this, to travel, it's a public-private set of stakeholders you pass through when entering an airport, boarding a flight. So they are connected. Yeah. So why not use that identity that governments need to check to cross a border and use it also for your airline and for the airport? In a way, of course, that they only get the data that they are authorized to have and they need to have to provide the service to you that you need from them.
Unfortunately, there's the matter of metadata as well, isn't there? So through this approach, the government gets to know all of the different organizations that you're interacting with.
That depends on how you do it.
Absolutely.
You need to orchestrate this, and how do you organize your workflow?
So ultimately, it comes down to who do you trust?
Absolutely. So it needs, trust is always the key word for me in this, and this is also about communicating to citizens, to passengers. But you need to be clear that you only share the data with each stakeholder that you need to share. Basically, you need to transform what we do now in a non-digital world to digital.
Or to the of digital and physical, like phygital, if I may say. If you check the use case of Apple, what did in the US, when there is the possibility to add to the wallet, to your watch or to your phone, the driving license or your digital, your identity document, and this is typically the use case, like to simply and frictionless bypass through the checks at airports. Yeah.
But you would already do that with a physical
document. You have to start.
So if you do it with a digital one, we have to make sure that, exactly like you say, the data you would give now with a physical document would remain with the stakeholder or the organization you're giving it to, and not end up with the next organization you're not giving it to.
So I think we're sort of painting a picture here where, and I'm just sort of, it's like putting together a puzzle. One part of the puzzle is that users need to be in control of their data.
Absolutely.
We've already kind of come to some agreement on that. Another part of the puzzle is that there's a part for government to play in this, and that part is to do with providing data. There could be other roles. We might come back to that in a second. What's the part that financial services should play?
Actually, if we are again thinking what was in that video before, that banks have to do because of that they are regulated bodies, the KYC procedure, which is some kind of like regulated and standardized process with same level of quality assured. We can say that banks can play the role on behalf of the government when they are proving the identity, so they can be some kind of like attorney which empowered to prove everyone's of your identity in specific cases. And in that way, they can catalyze digital services. Because if you go through countries which have adopted digital identity schemes, it has direct impact on the GDP of that countries. It's in between 2 to 10% of GDP, which are just boosted by adoption of digital identity schemes, because there is a lot of new services popping up. Actual physical services are transformed into digital ones, which has absolutely big turnover and different speed of production. And as well as there are huge cost savings, because as a user, you can just attend the service wherever you want, whenever you want. That's it.
Could it ever be the case that I would use a bank ID to cross a border?
I don't think so.
So there are limits to what you can do with bank ID, then,
Absolutely.
right?
If I may ask, why? I'm really curious, yeah.
Yes, because so how is your bank ID onboarded? How is it verified? At what level is it verified? How secure is it? The level, we're talking national security here, so we need to know who is that person in front of the border, and is he allowed to cross the border, or she? And we need to know that at the highest level, and we need to know that in a way that there are international standards by which we can verify if a government has issued this document to a person, if it is bound to this person, preferably through biometrics.
So I think, thank you for your answer, because as you said, it's about the level of assurance. Yeah?
Yes.
So if I'm going back to the IDAS, what you mentioned before.
Yes.
Today, usually bank ID schemes, typically in Nordic, in Czech, and in other countries, are at the level of 2.
Yeah, the middle level.
The middle level, the high level of assurance. But if you go to the highest level, to the third one, then it should be treated, because of the standard, as the governmental document. So if I would have the identity at the third level of IDAS, it should be trusted same way as the physical governmental document, because it has same level of assurance and same level of quality.
Yeah.
The
interesting thing here is, and this is kind of where we're going to, where I'm heading, but I'm just sort of
it should be
is that we have in Europe a framework. The framework is a set of rules documented in the EIDAS regulation and implementing acts or whatever. And as you've said, Martin, it says that if you do certain things, you achieve a low level of assurance or substantial or high. And so whilst today bank IDs maybe don't achieve the high because they don't have the procedures and everything in place, and that doesn't mean they couldn't. Now, I know there's like a political and there's other things.
No, there's another standard, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is the keeper of the Treaty of Chicago, which organizes everything around aviation, amongst its civil passenger facilitation, and they are setting the standards for passports. But they're also setting the standards for now the digital version of that, which is called a digital travel credential, which is the type 1.
Is that connected in with at all with the digital driving license work,
No, because driver's license usually are not for crossing, not that I know of, let's put it that way. But there is, so we globally we come together, countries, and this is where we set standards for passports. Because otherwise, how does another country, how can you verify a passport from another country? There's a set of standards, and we have, for biometrics now, we have the chip. So to make it an eMRTD, an electronic machine readable travel document. And that chip is with standards, and it has a public key infrastructure, which is crucial because this is how you can, if you have the key, you can verify that identity.
So we have the IDAS. We've mentioned international standards for travel documents. I just mentioned through mobile driving license in the mix there. I also mentioned the framework that the UK is working on, and there's loads of others. I mean, we could go on and on and on here.
Could I chuck a couple of thoughts in, Steve?
Yes, go for it.
So essentially, we're still fractured.
Yes.
Yes,
we're fractured on a
heading.
geographic basis, we're fractured on a vertical basis.
Yes.
And we need to separate the concerns of level of assurance from the technology and from the use cases, so that we can actually reuse the information that underlies all of this. And that, I think, was one of the kind of core hypotheses of the Gain paper, that we can start building something. So another thought that just was striking me as we were kind of, the flow of conversation was going, was that the government identities in particular are naturally very geographically bounded.
Yes.
And actually what consumers and relying businesses want is global reach now. And you don't generally get that with government-delivered identity solutions. The hypothesis with Gain was that we could show a way forward to deliver something which was valuable to the relying parties and to the consumers. And the third part of that triangle is the providers. They get benefit because they maintain that customer relationship by delivering something valuable to that end user. That one of the things that came to me, you know, I'm basically a technology guy, but I got very involved in this, and Gain had 3 dimensions to it. One was business, one was legal, and one was technical.
Yes.
And if we can deliver
The
on
classic
something,
BLT.
the classic BLT, yes, and we use that term quite a lot.
Yeah.
But if we don't satisfy all 3 of those domains, then we've got a problem, because it's not going to work if you don't have all of those covered. The other kind of key factor was making sure under the business domain that there was a real reason for each of the kind of key participants in the whole ecosystem to work with each other. So consumers had to see benefit, the banks needed to see some benefit, whether that's retention of customers or revenue, I think, as Rod was talking about in the presentation earlier. And relying parties wanted to see value, which was ability to reach their customers without Mark or anybody else having to keep hundreds of usernames and passwords.
Yeah, and so I think what the Gain initiative is seeking to do, which I find quite interesting, is okay. So they're recognising there's already some places where there are working schemes.
Yeah.
Those might have have certain scope around them. A bank ID might be only working for in a particular country in the Nordics or something. Although there's obviously a very good one in the Czech Republic
There is, yeah.
that we know about, and there's It's Me in Belgium as well. So these are growing, but to recognise that actually we can't. It's kind of too difficult to solve this kind of top-down global problem. We actually have to start bottom up.
Well,
Yeah.
what I just mentioned, this digital travel credential, that's a global set of standards that can be used globally. So that's a really important first step, I think, because otherwise how can we cross borders and travel internationally? How can we trust that digital identity internationally? So that's I think it's a game changer step that has been made. And so it's type 1 that's out now. It's still bound to your physical document, but there are other steps in progress.
One of the things we haven't really touched on, but I think it's possibly important, is this whole idea of self-sovereign identity. We don't have a chance to unpack that, but I'm thinking particularly about the standards that are being developed around that. So verifiable credentials, basically cryptographically signed digital certificates that have, issued by authoritative sources. And so would one of the potentials here be that a government could issue the passport in the form of a verifiable credential or something like that?
It's coming.
Yeah, exactly. And
This
so
is
then
coming.
that
This
comes
is-
into you get that in your wallet, vault, whatever you want to call it.
I'll give you an example. So I'm not involved in this, so I'm just explaining what I've been told and what I've read and what I've been working with. There's type 1, 2, and 3. And type 1 is out now, which is it's bound to your document. And you can make it yourself using your NFC technology on your mobile device. But for 2 and 3, there is also in the planning to have a complete, I think it's number 3, completely separate self-sovereign digital identity, mobile passport or digital passport, basically. Yeah. And a simple use case can be that if you're on holiday and you lose your passport, you go to the embassy. You don't have to be handed over a physical one, but they can hand you over a digital one for the single use of getting home, for instance. But obviously, and so which is a really practical use case. So I think there is an incentive for governments to start working around this.
I think there are some governments that are actively looking at this.
Yes.
Unfortunately, in the UK, we don't seem to be as far ahead as perhaps we could be on this particular topic.
Well,
but I mean, I don't know everything that's going on in government, but from what I can tell, Canada is really actively, both at a federal and provincial level really actively looking
They've
at
been
this.
very actively involved in the development of the digital travel
Correct.
credential, which the
Yeah,
Dutch
yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
One thing I would like to mention, I'm really curious, because again, that could be a game changer, I think, is the EU digital wallet that
Yes.
should be coming up in about a year, I'm told. So that
Well,
will be,
I think
I
so they published the draft
In-
or the
in June.
proposed regulation in July. They're now in consultation. That's going to take a year or two. I think realistically, I mean, I'll speak to various people trying to get opinions, trying
Yes.
to gauge it. I think it's probably 4 or 5 years away, but it's coming, right?
Can I
But,
ask, who provides the wallet?
Well, this will be determined as part of the consultation discussions that are going on at the minute. I think the idea will be, so in the regulation as it currently is written, it says that the government is responsible for making sure their citizens have wallets. That could mean they build one. It could mean that they recognise one in the market that's, meets the relevant standards.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some other approach, I don't know.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that they build one could mean that like they build one by themselves, or they just ask somebody to build on behalf of them some.
I
So
think-
there
I think-
could
I
be
think-
governmental,
I think that-
commercial,
yeah.
or some like global player.
I think the likelihood is you've got, 27 member states, they're not going to build 27 wallets. Likelihood is they'll go, here's the standards that we all adhere
Yeah.
to, we all recognise. Here's a mechanism for us certifying or recognising which wallets are good, and then member states will decide which ones they use.
But I just showed my EU DCC, my digital COVID certificate, to get in here.
Yes.
That was developed very quickly, and it's the same group within DG Connect working on
Yeah.
the EU digital wallet. So if the set of standards is all they have to produce, and then each member state can either take...
That certificate is a lot simpler. I mean, we can't go into the detail of it, but
Oh,
it's a lot
no,
simpler
of
than what we
course,
would get
yeah.
with a
So there's
identity
a
wallet.
little concern I have niggling in my mind about the SSI domain,
Yeah.
and that is that the wallet is a bit of software provided by somebody. Are we just moving the identity provider from a server to a mobile device? And
Well, no,
trusting,
so
and
the-
trusting some software vendor?
Well, your credentials need to be held securely in an appropriate thing, right?
Yeah.
And that thing itself needs to be robust and reliable. And so I think the likelihood is there'll be organisations, banks maybe, who knows, that provide wallets and that those wallets can be certified.
And we can just add that they have to be secured by in ideal multi-factor authentication.
I mean, or it could be, I think,
That doesn't
no, you think, well,
solve all of the risks.
but we
in my
have wallets
humble
already
opinion.
today.
Yeah.
We have wallets for managing payment credentials. I've got a wallet on my phone here.
Yeah.
It's cryptographically secure. It's
How do you
robust
know?
against fraud.
I don't want to push too hard into this area, but are you sure? How can you be sure?
I can be sure, or more sure than most, because Consult Hyperion's business involves us being involved in the projects that develop
Okay,
these
that
things.
particular one, yeah. I'm not planning to
Right.
review the code of every wallet I ever
No.
use, Anyway, let's not dive into that. It's not identity problem
But-
as such.
What's
At the end of the day, every system that we build, no matter what its shape, could have security flaws
Precisely.
and faults, right? And so there has to be governance around it to make sure that ordinary people like us can have trust in those things.
Yeah.
The word trust was mentioned a lot in the video, and that's really what it comes down to, right?
You have seen that the lowering of level of frauds within the using of digital
Yeah.
identity. So
Absolutely, but my point is that I don't think the self-sovereign ideology is terribly different to what we have today. Bank ID in Norway and Sweden is based on a server-based approach. There's nothing self-sovereign about it.
I actually think the one of the key differences here is actually a technological difference, which is in a lot of existing traditional federated identity systems, the data is held in a database, and whilst that database will have controls around it, the data is there visible to the identity provider. The key difference between that and a self-sovereign wallet is the wallet provider cannot see the data. And so that means
Should not.
well, if it's built properly,
Yes.
cannot see the data. And so if they can see the data, then it's not a self-sovereign wallet, right? And so what that means is it's just raising the bar in terms of privacy, control, transparency over how your data is being used. So you can argue they are very similar in many ways. The differences between them is quite nuanced, but actually there is a big difference from a privacy point of view. We're kind of getting out of time here, and we could go on for ages.
Super interesting topic.
What I wanted to just ask, really just to kind of wrap up, is so we've had some sort of discussion around the sorts of things that an ecosystem might consist of, who might play a role in that ecosystem. When's this going to happen? When's it going to be that I get up in the morning and instead of having to remember 1 million passwords, I've got an easy way to do all the things that I need to do during the course of the day? When's that going to be? And what's the thing that we need to do now to make that happen? Martin, I'll come to you first.
So I can answer pretty quickly and pretty simply. It happens now.
Well, it might happen where you live. But
maybe in some countries, at least in some countries, yeah. But you can check, for example, that bankid.cz website, which is as well as available in English. So check it and just get inspired and build something here.
Yeah.
You can check the France Connect, for example, in France, which is contrary, led by government. And actually, just wanted to say, it is available to the majority of French citizens. It is connected with a few hundreds of third parties today, and still on the growing trajectory. So it's happening, and there are third parties where you can just very simply prove your identity on their websites or through their services, or get onboarded to their services very simply by one Face ID, one fingerprint. So it's happening, and it's earning the money, it's bringing value to customers, it's simplifying our lives. Maybe last point, there was a national Czech counting in the Czech Republic in April, and I was just in Paris. Previously, I had to go to the Czech, fill in a few forms of papers, and give it to the Czech bank, to the Czech post office, and then it was done. This year, it was absolutely different. I did it during the weekend's night with a glass of wine. It took maybe 5 minutes, and fully on my smartphone, and with the Czech bank ID assistance, because I got the authentication. So awesome. This is how it should work, and how it is already working sometimes.
Yeah, okay,
and
good.
I just wish you to have that experience.
Yeah, no, I wish for that as well, trust me. Annette?
I agree with Martin insofar as that indeed it is happening, but maybe I'm impatient. It's not happening fast enough, and I think more governments need to be more directly involved and really thinking about how can we use the digital identity that we're working on, and most of them are working on for access to government services, but how can we, if we have that anyway, we might as well provide it to our citizens, and it could be, many more use cases for it. Private, business use cases or banking or whatever. But happening, not fast enough. Government should be more involved.
Great.
I can just confirm that from my personal experience. We had open-minded and cooperative government partners. So that's why we succeeded, for example, in Czech Republic.
Yeah. So,
good. Mark, when do you think this is going to happen, and what do we need to do?
So the technology is there. We can do the tech today with whichever architecture you like. Yeah. However, I think a lot of the programs that are going on today are not truly customer focused. They're not focusing on the needs of the customer, which is to be able to reach anybody globally now. I mean, in reality, we're in a very digital world. And it's the business model and the legal domain that need to be solved. And we need to get people like you to join the highly ambitious efforts to build something which is more focused on delivering it on an international or indeed global scale. I'd just say there's, out of the back of the Gain white paper, there's the IAF, also the OpenID Foundation has a technical proof of concept underway, being led by Torsten Lodderstedt. And the OIX is spinning up something to look into the policy domain in partnership with the OpenID Foundation. So I know we've got Nick Mothershaw, who's the chair of the OIX in the audience today as well. So come and join in with the ambition to solve this on an international scale.
Excellent. I think
with a customer focus. I think I made that point, but that's absolutely key.
I think the overriding message there is stop talking about it and get on with it.
Yeah.
Make it.
Make it happen. Been great to speak to you. Thank you so much for coming. I know some of you had to deal with the traumas of coming cross-border over the weekend. So let's have a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you very much.